And so I had 50 plus deaths. If you're not back in 48 hours, I'm going to hunt you down and kill you. Running around in the streets, getting arrested, getting head banged by cops, pure MDMA. I was moving a lot of that stuff. I just didn't care. And I guess that may be a good drug dealer in a way, because I didn't have anything to lose. Steve and Bootsy.
Hello everyone, welcome back to Filta. I'm Steve.
I'm Bootsy.
And we've got a very special guest on the show for you this week. We'd like to introduce to you Jesse Moskel.
Jesse's had an extraordinary life.
Violence, tragedy, death and even an international police chase.
It resulted in him getting sentenced to death in Thailand for drug trafficking. You might have seen it on Banged Up Abroad or Locked Up Abroad even. Depends where you are in the world.
So this week we've got the pleasure of interviewing him and hearing his story firsthand. Enjoy.
Aye. Don't forget to press subscribe if you like the show.
Can you guys hear me all right?
Yeah, perfect. Can you hear us?
Yeah, fantastic.
Oh, perfect. Well, thanks so much for coming on. We made a bit of a mess up with the time difference. We were sitting here at 9 p.m. Sydney time, but we didn't realise it was like 5 a.m. your time. We're totally fucked up the time difference, so we've been sitting here for like 2 hours waiting, but...
Oh, man. What time is it there?
What we are now, it's just 10 past 11 p.m, so not too bad.
All right, that's kind of the time you guys come alive, isn't it?
Yeah, pretty much.
What's the time? What time are you in Colombia? Is it just Eastern time? Yeah.
Yeah, I'm in South Carolina, so New York time, East Coast.
Yeah, so I thought so. See, that was his job to figure out the time difference. He had one job.
Good to see you taking responsibility there.
Yeah, thanks so much for coming on the show. Anyway, it's a pleasure to have you on. I hope you can understand our accents okay. Obviously, we're not from Australia. We're from Northern England. So yeah, just bear with us. And yeah.
To be honest, I love the accents. I do.
Cheers, mate.
Cheers, mate.
So yeah, so your story is an extraordinary one, to say the very least. You were on death row in Thailand, which is notorious for its dreadful prison conditions, as many know. So yeah, we greatly appreciate you coming on to talk about your story. So could you tell us a little bit about, your life before that point and kind of, I guess, what led you up to that point a little bit?
Sure, man. Yeah, what led to death sentence? Geez. Well, most significant,
like your childhood and all that. And
yeah, I mean that's an open-ended question there. I think and I don't think I could have answered this in this particular way up until now. I'm 46 years old. I'm finally a father, so I've got a family. I've got a stepson.
Congratulations.
16. Thank you. I've got a daughter who turns 1 in about 10 days, and a wonderful partner in Jerry. So family was the thing. Family and church growing up were big influences in my life, and not all of them in a good way. My father was a pastor of a church called Worldwide. You guys heard the podcast recently, which TJ Jinx put out. Dr. TJ, she's a wonderful woman, brilliant woman, and she really told the story well. It was an apocalyptic cult my father got us involved in, and we believed that we were the chosen people. And there was only like 100 grand of us in the world, and we were all going to be saved by God, while the rest of you heathens were going to burn in eternal fire. And we legitimately believed this with our entire beings. And many of those people who were in the church didn't save for retirement. They made do without a second car, even though they really needed one. And they sent all this money to California, where the headquarters was. And the leader spent it in excess. He, flew in private planes and ate caviar, and he did God's work. Wow. But we were all into it. I myself, least of all, I was suspicious from the get-go, because, and this is where family is important. Are you guys familiar with that song, Cats in the Cradle?
Yeah.
Okay, it talks about the father and it's written from the perspective of the Father and the Son, and how, I remember one verse. I think the second verse, he says, "My whatever," or the basketball. I think he says, well, "Can we play tomorrow?" He doesn't even ask his dad to play now because he knows his dad is too busy for him. And that was kind of my life growing up. My father, God bless him, I love my dad to death, and I'll tell you why I love him now in a bit. But he was always too busy. He was always taking care of that church. So while family was taught to me to be the most important thing, his church family was more, it took precedent over spending time together. And so, and we moved around a lot to different churches. So I have a collection of memories from childhood. When we lived in North Carolina, he said he was going to build me a little playpen, like a little house in the backyard. And we went out and bought lumber, and we built the foundation and laid the floor. And that was it, man. 3 years went past, and we eventually moved to another city. And he never got past the foundation. So I used to play out there and pretend that I had walls and a roof over the house. In the next place we lived, he said, "I'm going to build you a basketball goal." So we went out and bought lumber, put the backboard up on a tree. All you had to do was attach the rim. Never got around to it. No. And so my childhood was littered with memories like that. And then also violence. There was the church was very strict, as you can imagine, an apocalyptic cult, you got to toe the line or else, buddy. And so there was beatings, and they were called spankings, and they were always justified in his mind. And even both my parents attacking me on more than one occasion, where I was down on the ground as a little boy like this, and they're just wailing away on me.
That's awful.
So growing up, to be honest, I wasn't a very well-balanced kid. I didn't feel safe around my home. And as a result of that, personality defects just have to be modulated by something. And for me, that was drugs. So there's your pat answer right there. Yeah. We'll unpack that some more as we go.
Yeah, understandable.
Yeah. We've just watched a Netflix documentary about a cult like that. Like, it seems like there's loads of them in America, it seems. Yeah. What was it called?
Yeah, you guys are lucky to live in the era, I think, in England that you are, because church is pretty much dead over there. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I grew up. I grew up a Catholic, went to Catholic school and stuff, and I was also Protestant churches in the area and stuff. But it wasn't. So in school, it was kind of how to learn the Bible and sing hymns every Tuesday and pray and all that stuff. But it wasn't quite to that extent what you're talking about. Yeah, it was kind of I don't know, more of a tradition sort of thing.
Yeah. All right. So could you tell us a little bit about your backstory, like as an older, like as an adult prior to getting locked up kind of thing? Like what led you to that point? Like what were you doing kind of thing with yourself before that point?
Okay, certainly. What led to, so what was happening right before I went to prison was, I was 31, just about, and I was living in Korea. I'd gone over there to teach English and kind of get away from myself. I was living in Miami prior to that, and running around in the streets, getting arrested, getting headbanged by cops, getting arrested, just lots of bad news. So. And I'd flunked out of school. I'd gone to advertising school. It's funny because there's a lot of self-sabotage in the first half of my life. Thank God I'm minimizing that these days. But first half of my life, for instance, I'd moved to Miami to go to advertising school. And first quarter in, I was top of my class, just blowing everybody else away. I was really good at it. And then I just blew it off, and it was like I couldn't handle success. It was like I was comfortable being a failure and being in a position where I had to struggle and really, live an inconvenient sort of lifestyle. And so from Miami, I just I was so frustrated with everything. I just wanted to get away. So I went over to Korea and was teaching English. But of course, you know, things caught up with me over there. I initially started selling weed from, I met a Nigerian in the heart of Seoul down in this really ghetto part of Korea. And I'll never forget, I went to this guy. I said, "Hey man, I hear you're a guy that can get things." He said, "Yeah man, what do you want?" And I was like, "I need a bit of weed."
Was he teaching as well?
He took me to an apartment. Yeah, I was teaching it at the time. This was on a weekend.
Yeah.
You know, we finished teaching on Thursday, so we had like a 3-day weekend every week. And so I went down to the city, and I went with this guy. You know, he's a sketchy guy, and Korea is real weird because a lot of the streets aren't lit. So we're going through all these weird alleyways, and I'm getting deeper and deeper. I'm like, man, what am I in for here? You know, I'm kind of tensed up. And eventually he pulls up. He goes, this is my pad here. And he climbs up above the stairwell and he hits a board, and this giant duffel bag falls down. Boom! It's like 50 pounds of weed. And so he gave me a bunch. I took that back, sold it to my friends, and thus began a new tradition over there, which lasted for a while. And then I met a fellow he was from south of London, and I can understand you guys perfectly. I had no fucking clue what this guy was saying.
Really?
He'd start talking, and I'd just say, I had no idea what he was talking about. But he had a really good source for MDMA, and he had these big pink crystals. They're just pure MDMA.
Yeah.
And that's probably one of the better ones. And I guess a lot of people are using it now. It's trendy for therapeutic purposes. But anyways, he started selling me this. And I've always been in sales for one reason or another. I think I just like to talk. But that took off. That just took off. You know, I already had my customers with the weed. Every customer bought that stuff, and they shared it with all their friends. And I mean, overnight, it was like I was moving a lot of that stuff. And then there was 2 or 3 other people in the country who were selling it. And I was kind of mad about that because I knew my supplier was giving it to them as well. So I said, hey, look, man, I want to be the exclusive provider in Korea. I want a monopoly in this country. So he agreed to give me his whole supply. So I sent people. I remember I sent this one guy named John, who I barely knew. He was a courier though. So I gave him 10,000 US in a suitcase in a hotel. It was very, very sketchy situation. But I gave this guy a suitcase. I said, if you're not back in 48 hours, I'm going to hunt you down and kill you. And he took off with my money. And sure enough, he came back. I didn't have to kill him. He brought me back. Sorry?
That would have been another death sentence.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Only if they catch the body. Only if they find the body.
Yeah, I guess just rewinding back a little bit. So the Worldwide Church of God, and read my notes here, and Herbert W. Armstrong's teachings that only God and not the medical community could provide true healing was a theology, you know, that the religion believed in, and basically not trusting doctors, and that would ultimately have obviously a devastating impact on you and your family. Are you able to talk a little bit about that, and then kind of what led to your kind of disillusion with the church, and then moving on from that point?
Yeah, great question. Yeah, that rewinding, that was the beginning of the end for me. I was, as I told you before, I was suspicious of this wonderful church that basically left me fatherless, and growing up with my mother teaching me homeschooling me, and you know, I yearned for a fatherly influence, and I knew this church was taking that away from me. And then so I'm the oldest of 4 siblings, and Molly was number 3, and she fell sick when she was just 3 years old with leukemia, a really deadly kind. And sorry, 1 second. I'm gonna give you guys a quick glimpse. Here's what everything's for.
Oh, hello. How are you?
Hi. There you go. Good morning.
Oh, how are you?
All right. But anyways, yeah, when she died, my sister died. She was born on Christmas, actually. And she died 8 days before Christmas. And with that, I knew, and because they didn't see proper medical treatment and they just prayed over her for a long time, that was the beginning of that long, really destructive cycle for me, where I was self-sabotaging because nothing made sense in life, and losing her was just a big deal. So yeah, that was tough, but that was, so my dad tried to control me more and more from that point. And I was much stronger in my resistance. So he would try to punish me and I would run away. I would just disappear for days. Yeah. And that cycle just kind of perpetuated and enlarged over time.
Yeah.
And then to get back to where we were, the culmination of all that rebellion, you know, just totally not caring about really much of anything, you know, led you, I mean, I'm sure for a regular human being to say, hey, why don't you go become a drug kingpin in a foreign country where they have the death sentence? Like, that would probably not appeal to a whole lot of folks out there. But for me, it didn't even concern me. You know, my personal safety wasn't, I just didn't care. And I guess that made me a good drug dealer in a way, because I didn't have anything to lose. So the person on the other side of every deal had something to lose typically. I remember my hashish dealer used to import hash. He'd make picture frames and he'd send in a couple pounds with each portrait. So, you know, the customs inspectors open it up and they see a painting with a nice gold frame and they pass it on through. And then when it comes to us, we cut the frame because it's all made out of hash. It's just purely formed. And so we always had gold on one side of the hash, and that was the mark of our product. But yeah, he had a baby seat in the back of his van. I always remember when he'd bring me the loads, and so I knew he had something to lose, but I didn't. So I never, you know.
Yeah. How did you find like your initial, when you first got to Korea? How did you find like fitting in and stuff like that? Did you like? You say like you even went to Miami, like obviously like running away from your hometown, I guess, and then straight to Korea as well. How did you find like fitting in a totally foreign country?
That actually reminds me of an interesting point. I don't know if I've talked about much, but as a child, my parents, the church moved us to different locations, different states. So I had to make new friends every 3 to 5 years. Oh, yeah. And so most people have a hometown where they grow up and they can go back and visit. I never had that. You know, I remember at 11, we moved from North Carolina to New York. And I'm sorry, 13. I was 13. And so I just finished middle school. And to go into high school, I had a country accent and I talked slower and I probably thought slower. And I just wasn't up to speed with these other cats. And I didn't have any friends and I was very awkward. So, you know, that a lot of discomfort in here. And yeah, I may have been running, but I wasn't running necessarily from home because I didn't know where home was. I didn't have a family structure or a neighborhood structure that I could call my own. So that was difficult. And I empathize with a lot of people who are in our country, military brats, they call them, because both their parents are in the military. Yeah. The military, same thing. They move them from place to place all the time.
Yeah.
So,
as you mentioned, yeah, definitely. And you mentioned obviously when you were in Korea and it started with selling a bit of weed and stuff, and then eventually progressed MDMA. Was it over there where you experienced MDMA for the first time, or did you have that? Yeah. So what was?
No, That was the, well, I'd done ecstasy before,
Yeah.
but it was dirty. You know, it's mixed with all types of pollutants. I'd never experienced anything pure, and that was this. The other thing I'll mention too is I didn't have a tough time fitting in at all, because the 15,000 kids who went over there to teach English from your country and from Australia and from New Zealand and from America and Canada, we were all displaced. So we were all looking for something, you know? And so it was a very unique situation in that way. And so when I got there, I had an immediate, I'll even say, use the word family. I felt a familiar situation. I was at a school with 28 teachers, I believe. And 14 of us were from the States and so forth. And then 14 of us were Korean. So we each of us had a co-teacher. But those 13 other English speakers, those were my family. And we all lived in a dormitory. And so it was quite a good situation in that way for me.
Yeah.
And I'll be honest, I didn't miss home much while I was there.
So obviously your first hit of the pure MDMA, what was that like?
Yeah, that was good. A lot better than many of the drugs I've tried in the past. Some drugs made me paranoid and confused, and this seemed to like melt away all the fog, and it gave me extreme clarity, and it gives you a sense of empowerment and entitlement. And being the one that's supplying that and being the exclusive one that's able to get that in the whole country, like that was certainly powerful.
Yeah, it must have took a lot. It must have took a lot of time to, like, obviously, like, you make it sound like it just like happened really quick, but surely that it must have took like a long time for you to become like the sole supplier of MDMA in Korea. You know what I mean? Like, how long did it actually take you to get up to that level?
Build the empire.
Yeah.
Interesting. Not as long as you might think. I honestly, it fell together better than I could have planned it, you know, because I'd worked for maybe 6 months supplying the people in the area weed. And the only ones that were selling any drugs in that country were the Nigerians, and most people didn't have dealings with them. Most of us were, you know, white kids who lived relatively privileged lives, and so they'd all huddle in the bars and drink because they couldn't find drugs. And so when I showed up with weed, it was like a magnet, you know, and all these people just appeared. And this guy told this person's friend, and you know, it just mushroomed. And then when the MDMA came along, it was weed's not an addictive drug, you know, but MDMA for some people, it can have certain teachers calling me up on a Tuesday night when they have school the next day saying, "Hey, can I get a little bit for tonight?" And you know, that it went from a weekend business where I was selling, you know, a couple $1,000 worth of weed on the weekends to 7 days a week, and I was legitimately busy. Yeah. So, and then, like I said, the getting rid of the other competitors wasn't that big of a deal, because you have to remember, Korea was before me, it was pretty much a drug-free country, because number one, the prison sentences were so stiff, and number two, they're at the bottom of a peninsula with North Korea above them, which obviously is a no-go zone for them. And so they were a closed country. They didn't have any outside dealings with the world for a long time. And this push to have all the integrating them into society. So there was like, they were new too. They were kind of green. And, you know, I imagine there's probably a lot more drugs now in that country than there was then. But it was nothing to bring stuff in a plane, because they weren't looking for it. You know, what would be comparable is back in the 70s in the US, the DEA didn't have cocaine on the radar. I was just watching a Netflix about this the other night. People were bringing cocaine on the planes. I remember, you guys see the movie Narcos? Or the you remember in the beginning where they sewed the jacket together and put 5 kilos in the jacket and just flew it? Like you couldn't pull that off today, right?
Yeah.
But back then it was easy. And so that's kind of how it was. But there wasn't a lot of kids that were willing to risk that, because there was drug testing randomly in the schools where we taught, because they did have an inclination that these bad kids over here might be doing stuff they weren't supposed to. And there was a lot of kids that got sent home. So the climate was just right for domination in that regard.
Yeah. And I guess this might be a silly question, but obviously you went over there to Korea to obviously maybe run away from things and maybe looking for some sort of peace of mind. Before obviously all the drama started and before becoming a MDMA Kingpin, did you find the kind of peace of mind you were looking for in any way?
So that's a wonderful question, by the way, not silly at all. When the first time I got in trouble as a child, I robbed a store with some other older kids. And I actually didn't even take part in the robbery, but I provided the key for these guys to rob this place. And as a result, I got put on probation for 5 years. I was young. I don't remember how old I was, but I was really young. And that experience kind of initiated me into the world of being a criminal. And as part of my probation agreement, I had to complete 200 hours of community service. And 200 hours is a lot when you're not getting paid, okay? Yeah. So for a summer and then all that fall and winter, I actually worked at an after-school kids program. And I got to play with young children who, I don't know if that was the wisest thing to put criminals with young kids, but for me, it was wonderful. I've always loved young kids, and thank God I recognize the requirement to treat them well and to not, influence them in a negative way. And so I've always been great around kids, and so that was put on pause when I finished the 200 hours. But when I got to Korea, I was able to bring that back. And I actually had 2 jobs as a teacher. Like, I wasn't slack, man. I had 2 full-time jobs. I taught one school from 8 to 12, Monday through Friday, and another school from 2 to 8, Monday through Thursday. So I got 2 salaries, and I was with children all day long, and I loved it. And a lot of times I wouldn't even go to sleep, maybe an hour or 2 at night, and I'd get up and do it the next day. And so there was a great deal of peace in working with all those kids and seeing the joy in their faces as I was able to teach them English and play games with them. And I was well loved, and rightly so. I put my heart and soul into that. So yes, I did have a good degree of peace.
And how long were you actually, selling drugs and, before the shit hit the fan and you went on the run? How long were you doing that, and kind of how much money were you making?
Yeah, so the second, let's see, so we're talking about the span of a year and a half before I went down. There was a guy I met in prison who was from Sweden. His name was Kim Eriksson. I'm gonna blow him up because he just got out of prison like 2 weeks ago. He and I were in the Thai prison together. We both had death sentences, and thank God he's home. Huh?
He just got out now?
Just got out like
Wow.
2 weeks ago. He hit me up on the phone.
Wow.
Yeah, but he was in there for a good 9 years, 10 years. And so while we were in prison together, to answer your question, he had gotten a book, and this book was talking about the best ways to be a criminal. And one of this author's, his conclusion was, if you want to be a criminal, go buy yourself a sea fishing boat and go up around Alaska and illegally fish. Because guess what? It's fucking cold up there, and there's not a lot of cops up there. And the author, very aptly so, he said, the worst thing you can do is deal drugs, because guess what? You're landlocked, and there's a lot of police and more every year who are trying to catch you.
Yeah.
So if you're a drug dealer, it's inevitable.
Yeah.
So a 1.5 year run for me, that was a damn good run, because there's too many people watching you, and every person you sell to, you know, is gonna see what you're doing. So so yeah, it was about a 1.5 years. And I could have gotten caught easily sooner, but for whatever reason, I would be out of the country when a lot of stuff went down, and I would leave the country every time a product came in, because I was very sketchy about receiving packages. So the guy would ship stuff from England, and I would send it to a new mailbox every time. The mailbox would be set up by an associate with fake ID, and then he would go in there, and I'd pay him a lump sum to pick up the package, and it'd get delivered to my cell house and safe house, and that was it. I'd come back to the country, and everything was good. But a lot of teachers got busted, and they'd say the names of dealers or people who bought stuff from me, that bought it, sold it to them, and I never got snared into that. And I'm glad, because if I'd gotten busted in Korea, I'd still be in prison today.
Yeah. Wow. So you say you were working 2 jobs and obviously selling drugs full time as well. Did it get to the point where you were just purely just selling drugs, or did you always carry on? Did you sack
good
that
question. No. I when I finished the year, I was kind of burned out. You know, you can imagine working all those hours. So when I assume it's still this way in Korea. If you go over there to teach English, they give you a 12-month contract, and you make a couple grand a month, 3-4 grand a month, and then when you finish, you leave, you get a bonus. And so at the end of my year, I collected my bonuses, and I was done. Of course, now I don't have a working visa, so I have to leave the country every 30 days. But by then I had a girlfriend that was living with me, in Kim Suk, and she and I were going to get married, we had a house together. So I would just leave the country every 30 days. And I was done with teaching for a while, but by that point I had lots of money and I wanted to travel. I had the bug. So we'd go around the world. We'd go to Mexico a lot, do a lot of surfing. I'd stay down there for a month, and then I'd come back to Korea and sell drugs for a month, and then I'd go somewhere else. So, but yeah, that was kind of the lifestyle I was in by then.
Lovely. I saw on the Locked Up Abroad episode, you said it got to a point where the main worry or your main concern was that you didn't know what to do with all the money. So like, how much we were talking, and what did you actually do with it?
Yeah, so this is another truism that nobody likes to advertise about being a drug dealer. I made a shit ton of money, but getting a life sentence meant that I had to support myself in the prison. And in the first year, the first year I went in, I made more as a drug dealer than I ever did outside. Because once you're in prison, you buy yourself a cell phone, and all the other distributors that can help you grow are in the prison with you. So my business blew up even more than it did when I was outside once I got to prison. The caveat to that was that it didn't fulfill me anymore. And I was able to see a mirror of all the other me's in there. And I didn't like what I saw. So within a year, I converted to Christianity again. And I gave up drug dealing. The other part of that was my business partner, who was my wife, my girlfriend at the time. She was going to wait for me, but I thought I might be in there for life. And so I thought better of it. I told her, let's break up. Let's end this partnership. And I want you to go your own way. She ended up marrying another American, and they have kids now, or at least one. So she's, happy, I think. And I'm glad for that. But she would have waited, and I'm glad she didn't, because that's just, that wouldn't be right to keep her waiting for all those years. Yeah. But yeah, the money was fast. It was, you know, easily, I think 10 grand's the least I'd make in a week.
Wow.
So, you know, 50, between 50 and 100K a month, just money pouring in. I remember one of my favorite things used to be, there was this hashish, there was a Middle Eastern guy who had this beautiful restaurant, and we would go in there and I'd just take all my, you know, followers. We'd go in the restaurant and just book it for Friday night, like not a table. We booked the whole restaurant. They'd lock the front door, and it would just be all of us inside. And they have all these big hookahs, and I'd break out 100 grams of hash, and we just all, it's just crazy parties and lots of food and people throwing stuff and, you know, whatever. I'll just cover the bill at the end of the night. But yeah, we had some good parties.
Yeah. So you said you are out of the country when you got caught. Whereabouts exactly were you when you got caught?
Unfortunate, or maybe fortunate. So in the world, and this applies to you guys in the UK as well, in the world, there are a good number of countries that have what are known as prisoner treaties. And the idea behind these is that if one of you guys gets arrested in a foreign country, let's say you get a 20-year sentence, it's pretty hard to live in a foreign country. You don't speak the language, you don't eat the local food, maybe. So if you have an agreement with the UK, that imprisoning country will transfer you back to your country of origin after a certain period of time. The standard goes like this. If you have a numbered sentence, so in your case, say 20 years, you spend 4 years, and this is true of Thailand and England as well. So, and it was the same for America. So you get arrested in Thailand, you spend 4 years if you have a numbered sentence. So you get 100 years, you only have to spend 4. Then you go back to England, and then you only have 96 years to go. But and Thailand gives out lots of high sentences. But in my case, they gave me a death sentence, which is 50 years. A life sentence, a death sentence is death sentence. A life sentence is 50 years. And so I had 50 plus death. And the way you get around that, because that's something you want to get around, is you do something called lapsalapap, which means you accept all the charges and you don't fight your case. This is what my buddy Kim did wrong. And I advised him, and he told me within the first minute of calling me 2 weeks ago, he said, "You were right, motherfucker. I should have accepted my case." Yeah. If you fight your case, as Kim did, he had a death penalty. So he went to court number 1, and they found him guilty. And then he went to appeals court. 3 or 4 years later, he had to wait. Your first court, you sit in jail for a year or 2. Guilty, first court. And then he went to second court, guilty, second court. And then he went to Supreme Court, but that takes another 4 or 5 years. So it's like a 10-year process to go through 3 courts because it's very slow and backed up. So he was guilty on all counts, but they don't kill foreigners anymore. So he was guilty in 3rd court, still had death sentence, but now he's spent 8 years, which is double what a numbered sentence would give you. Death, you have to stay 8 years. And so he got to go home after about 10 years. In my case, I accepted my case. So they dropped the death penalty. Actually, my lawyers, this is where a lot of my drug money went. My lawyers got my drug penalty, my death case dismissed. The life sentence, because I accepted it, it went from 50 years to 25. So they give you half if you accept. But to be fair, Kim didn't want to accept this case, and I understand that sentiment. But me, I knew I was guilty. I wasn't hiding it. I wasn't fooling anybody, so I accepted it. Death penalty dismissed after 2 years of being under that, and the 50 years went to 25. I had a small sale charge from the guy that did the actual work. It was a 4-year sentence. They knocked that down to 2.5. So I had 27-year sentence after 2 years, 2.5 years of going to court, being in prison. So after 2.5 years, I finally got 27-year sentence. And then at 4 years, I woke up and I was like, holy shit, now I can go home. Wow. Another 1.5 years passed. Very slow.
Good job you had all that drug money.
Yeah, yeah. So, it's not expensive over there, man. You know, to be honest, if you have money, I would have. I'm probably delusional to say this, but there was a lot of good things that I could today I can recall about being in Thai prison. If you have money, there's a lot of corruption. So you can get yourself a cell phone and you can watch YouTube all night and sleep all day. I mean, you can buy servants. I always had servants who would roll up my bed for me, who would do my laundry. They'd prepare my meals. They'd carry my stuff up to the room and back down again. And even this, you buy a cell phone and then you hire somebody to keep it in their ass in a condom.
Okay.
No.
Yeah, I'll never forget the first day in Nigerian. You know, there was tons of Nigerians there, and one was very poor, but he needed money, and he knew the privilege that it would bring him. So he said, "Look, man, I will put your phone in my ass every day and carry it up to the phone through the search, because the guards search you when you're going up." And you know, it's a dirty business, but drug business usually is.
Yeah. So then, before you did get caught, how long were you on the run for, and what was that like?
Yeah. So the thing wasn't allowed to mention on Locked Up Abroad was Interpol. You guys are familiar with that outfit, I suppose. But that was a factor in my arrest. And I went. So I was in Taiwan. If you remember in the show, I was in Taiwan when I got the phone call. It was a Sunday morning.
Yeah.
They had just released my wife from jail because they didn't find anything. Actually, this is a good story. A month prior, I had gone to San Francisco because I had to leave every month, you recall. And so when I went to San Francisco, I was out in the Tenderloin district, and very sketchy, shady place to be. But I went to one of these smoker stores, right, for weed. And they had a whole section that was devoted to concealing your drugs. So you can imagine it's like a shampoo bottle with a false bottom, and, you know, oil can with a false bottom. And I bought all of them. Like I filled a whole suitcase with these, and I brought them back to Korea, and I'd just gotten a huge shipment in. So I put all the drugs, and I had a lot of different drugs by this point. You know, I had cocaine and hashish and ecstasy and acid. I put all this stuff in the false bottoms, and I put it into a cabinet, and then sold for a couple weeks and went off to Taiwan. Well, the police came in and raided the house, and Justin, the real name of the guy that narked on me, he had drawn a map of the house and told them where the drugs and the money and this and that were. So the police come in using this map, and nothing is where they thought it was going to be, because I just moved everything. And Suk says she was handcuffed on the kitchen floor, and she watched one police officer open the cabinet where all the drugs were, and he carefully took everything out of the cabinet, looked in the back, and then put everything back in.
That's hilarious.
So that's important, because had that not happened, she would still be in jail today.
Yeah.
Sorry, I got dogs causing a ruckus back here. Anyways, I forget where we were with that question.
Yeah, so how long were you then on the run after all that happened?
Yes, thank you. So Sue called me. She got out overnight because they didn't find any drugs. And then I stayed in Taiwan for a few days. I flew over to Thailand right away, because I figured they'd be putting my name out. And if I got on and off the plane before my name got out, that would be the best bet. In Thailand, I made a plan to cross the border illegally into Cambodia, and I thought I would live the rest of my life over there on the run. So I stayed in Thailand for about a month, made my plans. My business partner was low on cash, so we decided to do a little bit of dealing there, because it looked like it was going to be better than Korea. And my mindset was still expansion. Like, I was still sending drugs back to Korea from Thailand. and I wanted to expand into Thailand and Cambodia. So my greed knew no bounds. At this point, I'm like, fuck it, I'm all in. I'm gonna be on, I'm gonna be on the run for the rest of my life. So I'm just gonna embrace this lifestyle. So I was making these plans, and the night before I was to leave, I had a girl that was going to carry the drugs from Thailand into Cambodia. I had people who were going to help us cross around the border control, and we were all set to leave the next morning. And my business partner went out to do a small deal at the end of the night at like 5 a.m, and it was the cops. And funny, because I saw this coming. I knew the guy that he sold to, and I told him specifically, don't ever sell to that guy. He's too suspicious. He's too open. He's got to have some connection with the cops. It was just a hunch, but I was right. And sure enough, they caught the guy, and then they came and grabbed me. And then the next couple of days was literally just torture. They beat the shit out of me. And man, that was a rough couple of days. It's funny. I was just talking to a cop here in my town, and she's always trying to get me. She's like, look, there's a couple bad apples. We're not all bad. And I'm like, yeah, I just can't get behind that. I've seen too much, The last time I saw her, she goes, you know what? I watch TV too. I know who you are. I know where you've been. I understand, but I'm going to make you like me. Yeah. She might be one of the good ones, but anyways, that was the end of it. So I was on the run for about a month-ish.
Yeah. So you with I think on the show it said the name was Carl. Was that his name, Carl?
No.
So you are really like quite on the show anyway. It made you out to be like quite pally with him, and then you got locked up with him. Do you still ever hear from him, or?
Yeah, so that's the thing. That's the one thing. Honestly, I have to give my compliments to the director and the staff of Nat Geo. Those guys did a fucking amazing job. I'll say a bang up job. They really, I flew to London. I was there for a week. We filmed me talking in 3 days, I believe. Yeah, it was like 3 hours, three days, me talking for like 10 hours. So I talked for maybe 30 hours. And it was a wonderful experience with those guys over there. Then I flew home, and they flew to Cambodia, the whole crew, and they built all that stuff you see in the show. They built all that stuff. They flew in the Thai people where they had to, and they used Cambodians where they didn't have speaking parts, because Cambodians don't speak Thai. Mm-hmm. But for all the important parts, it was all authentic. I remember in the beginning of the show, I'm watching it for the first time, and my character, who in itself was a good story. This guy was from Australia, and when he read the part, he flew on his own dime over to London to win the part. Because he's like, this for me, I have to have this job. He was really.
He looked almost exactly like you.
Yeah.
Right? Yeah. It was funny because they thought I had hair, and I'd shaved my head. And when I got over there, they're like, oh shit. Our pool of actors may have just shrunk. But this guy that played my part, he shaved his head, and he was all about it. So I just lucked out in that the people that were involved really wanted to be involved.
Yeah, brilliant. So it's well known, as I mentioned earlier, that the prison conditions in Thailand are horrendous, to say the least. I heard a quote from an English guy who was serving time in Bangkok Central Prison, also known as the Bangkok Hilton, that said the foreigner section was nothing but a broken collection of ruined people that the wind had blown into the corner of Asia. Can you talk a bit about your experience there, and was that true for you?
That's a really good quote. It's so crazy, man. The biggest prison population when I was there was Iranians and Nigerians. And then there was a smattering of people from all over Europe, especially, and Africa, especially. I didn't see another American for 3 years while I was there, except for the missionaries that came a year later and converted me. But yeah, broken people, good God. yeah, they were unruly too. And I remember thinking of what an advantage I could gain, because these foreigners, you know, they obviously came to Thailand to exploit the country, you know, to bring drugs or do whatever, or basically a lot of them were sex tourists, you know, doing drugs. So a lot of them were small cases. When I got to the Hilton, though, that was only big cases. You know, it's 25 years and up to be in that prison. And I qualified. So, but yeah, I remember one Iranian couldn't take it. I remember he just got up one day and stood up on a picnic table and started stabbing himself in the neck.
Jesus.
Blood everywhere. And didn't kill himself either. So that's got to feel shitty. Failure at death too. But the truth of the matter was, like, Iran at that point was the biggest producer of meth in the world, I think. I don't know if that was official or not, but if you just saw the numbers of people that were coming in and the way they were doing it, I remember one guy in particular came in with 100 kilos, and he was the fucking decoy.
Jeez, fucking hell.
Yeah, they didn't even conceal it. They put 50 in one and 50 in the other, and he tried to walk through with 2 suitcases. And this guy's a drug addict, right? So he doesn't know not to do this. They're like, we're going to give you money for you and for your family. If you get caught, we'll take care of your family. And he went on right on through. I mean, no sane person's going to do that. But then there was tons of them like that. So,
wow. Yeah.
Wait.
All right. So what, like, can you remember how you felt actually, like, going in, like, your first night in there? Can you actually remember how you felt going
crystal clear. Crystal clear. I'll never forget that one. Yeah, no, it was so there's like a 3-week holding period when you get there. They kind of cool you off before they throw you in the mix. And that place was just, there was just nothing there, just concrete floors and people that were as lost as me, you know, just like, what the fuck happened? The first night I was in the real prison, you know, my 22nd night, I remember going into this crowded fucking room with an open toilet at one end, you know, and just sleeping on the floor and people stepping over you and kicking you by accident. Lots of people talking all night and just thinking, this is where I'm going to spend the rest of my life. Like, it's not a pretty picture. And there's a bit of remorse that's unlike anything I've ever experienced in life, where for me, growing up, and this is probably a parenting thing more than anything else, I used to get in a lot of trouble when I was a kid. And my parents, I'd call my parents when I got in trouble, and I'd tell them what happened. And, you know, it was always the other kid's fault. You know, I was hanging with some bad kids, and my mom was eager to give gasoline to that narrative because she thought her son was great. And they would bail me out. You know, they literally bail me out, or they find a way to get me out of trouble. So I never suffered a lot of consequences. And I think that's a mistake that we make as parents, because we want the best for our kids, and we don't want them to live with the pain of what the choices they've made. And this was the first time in my adult or child life that I couldn't call my mom and bail out. Yeah. So I was very immature at that point in my life. I was, you know, I was 31 when I got arrested on April 4th, and right before my birthday, and there was no way out. And that's a kind of remorse that it's just the sinking feeling. There's nothing you can do. That door is shut. I remember the night I came into prison that they were watching a horror movie. So I'm walking down this long pathway, and all the buildings are watching the same movie, because that's just how they do it in prison. And you can hear screaming coming from all the buildings. It was a bit unsettling.
Oh, not bad.
Did it? So I know you said nowadays that they don't actually carry out the death sentence to foreigners over there, but I'm guessing at the time you were there, they did. So what was the realization like when you actually thought that, you know, you were potentially going to die, facing death?
Yeah, that was changing at the point. So I wasn't real concerned about dying. I was just concerned more about staying there forever. Yeah. But to that point, And to the earlier point about the broken foreigners, they had really bad attitude towards the Thais, and especially after they got locked up. I remember walking with this one Nigerian. He goes, "Can you believe they locked us up in this place, man? All we did was bring in some." I'm like, "Of course I can believe it. You know, we brought drugs into this country. We're ruining this country with our drugs." And he just wasn't hearing it. But the attitude amongst the foreigners was always, fuck them, fuck their language, fuck their food, you know. And so there were all these foreigners were like grasping for familiarity. So the English, for instance, you guys had one of the best embassies in the world in terms of prisoner support. So every 8 weeks at the time, the English embassy would come in and they would bring food and they would bring all kinds of support. So they got a meal that was familiar to them every couple of weeks. And I remember thinking, this attitude's gonna kill me. I'm gonna embrace everything Thai. I'm in their country. I'm gonna learn the language. So I learned to read, write, and speak the language within the first 2 years. And that totally transformed my entire experience. I cook rice every day in my house now. To this day, I use Instapot and I eat rice with all my meals. But I decided to embrace that shit and love the Thais and love the experience, get to know the guards, get to know all the Thai kingpins that were in the prison. And I learned all these stories because none of those guys spoke English, but I got to be friends with those people. And I'm still friends with a lot of them today. They hit me up and Sawadee Ka, Pinyang Rai Bang. I speak Thai to them now. And it's just a beautiful thing, man. It completely, utterly transformed. And I got to experience a prisoner lifestyle that I don't know, maybe a few dozen other foreigners in the world have ever experienced.
So apart from is he Swedish? Is it
Yes.
Kim?
Yeah. Kim.
Yeah. Do you keep in touch with anybody else at all, or is it just himself?
Oh yeah. I've got a friend from Burma who recently got married. I'm really proud of. Dano, shout out to him. He was a drug addict, around 20 years old, living in Burma. I think he got caught with 50,000 yaba pills.
Oh yeah.
And they gave him a life sentence, and he did. I want to say he did 22 years. No transfer treaty with Burma and Thailand, and so he stayed in there all of his 20s, all of his 30s, and got out in his 40s. And he just went home and got married, and I'm super happy for him. So yeah, I mean, these guys hit me up regularly. I get a new one every couple months that just got home. And and a lot of them try to do business with me. I politely decline. I tell you, I am in a position right now where I could elevate my game. I know kingpins around the world, in every country, in every continent, and they're all willing to do business with me. And I instead now I live out here. You can see behind me, we got a lake view in the back there.
Yeah, it does.
Now, I'm building a small resort hotel. We've got 4 units right now. The plan is to have about 10 on this property.
Where's the money coming from? Where's all the money coming from?
It's all legitimate now.
Have to come and stay out there one day.
Yeah.
That's why I mentioned it. I'd love to have you guys.
Yeah, definitely.
US. Yeah.
Yeah.
You got a place to stay.
Oh, brilliant. Thanks very much.
Yeah,
Appreciate it.
Yeah.
I've never been at the US ever, so yeah. I'll take it on that.
All right.
So I was actually watching another podcast you were on, and you said, obviously I was up to like terrible experiences that we've touched on already, but there was even certain times where if people had passed away or they'd killed themselves or whatever, they would leave the bodies in the cells because of the body count. If the body was still there, the bodies had to add up still. So if they were still in the cell, the numbers still added up. So I guess you had to experience, sharing cells with people that were dead.
Yeah, man, there was a lot of death. I'll never forget the first one. It was a heroin overdose, and needles have always made me uncomfortable. Like I've pretty much done every drug, but heroin and those needles, man, like I know, and especially now with fentanyl and other more powerful drugs that are emerging, I really try to stay away from that stuff. And unfortunately, in prison, the most common drug, you know, being near the Bermuda Triangle, was heroin, and lots of pure heroin over there in the prisons, and actually cheaper inside than outside, because people need to cope, right, with the horrible situation. In fact, I knew one English bloke who just got home. I won't say his name, but he had a treaty, and he chose to stay in prison his entire sentence because his heroin connection was so good. You know, all he wanted to do was get high.
Yeah.
So he could have gone home after 4 years, and he stayed like 16.
That's a serious addiction.
But it goes to show, like, if you don't have family outside, if you don't have people who love you outside, like, what's the motivation? You've got something to love inside. That's kind of crazy, but it's but yeah, that was rampant in there. And the guy next to me made me very nervous because he was very sloppy with his needle, and they were sharing it around. I used to know a lot of guys who didn't use heroin before they got there, gave up on life, started injecting. And sanitation, as you know, is pretty low down there. Pretty low.
Yeah.
It's non-existent.
Yeah.
They would sit in a circle around a little bowl of water, and they would pass the needle around. And so many people I knew died from HIV, untreated HIV. But this guy next to me shot up, and that was it. He died on the spot, and the body just stayed there all night. And then this was at like 4 p.m. So he was there. We're in the cell 16 hours a day. So 4 p.m., we had just gotten locked down. We didn't get out till 8 the next morning, 7 the next morning, whenever the guards felt like it. But yeah, he stayed in there all night. You know, you call and, hey, he's dying, and they come and look, you know, and they walk away. They don't open the cell for nothing. So the guy died, no medical attention, and they took him out the next morning. The prisoners take him out, and not the guards. They don't do any work in prisons. But that was the first of many.
Yeah. So you say, like, when you first went in, you were in a room full of, like, how many of our people, toilets all over the place, stuff like that. Did it get to the point where you were just in a cell maybe with maybe one other person or 2, 3 people?
Yeah, when I moved to America.
Yeah.
When I got to America, I went to federal penitentiary in LA.
Yeah.
I had one cellmate, and it was the most glorious thing. I had my own bed. It had a mattress and a top sheet and a bottom sheet and a blanket and a pillow. That was the first time I had a real pillow in 6 years. But in Thailand, no, it was, I want to say 35 or 39 was the least in a room. And different prisons were different. You know, sometimes we were in very small rooms suited for 6 people, and we have 14 or 22. And it'd just be, you know, it was just sleeping like this was pretty much the norm, or on your side. Yeah.
Wow. Must have been a luxury going back to the States. I read an article that I think you wrote where you said, I didn't serve time, I made the time serve me.
Cool.
Was that, you know, something positive that you got from the experience as well? And what did you mean by that?
That quote has dictated my life since the first time I read it. The quote came from a book written by a fellow named Bo Lazoff, who's dead now. But he was an interesting character, far more interesting, I think, than myself. He came up in the hippie era, and he and his wife would just travel around the country, and they would go work on people's boats, you know, as a second mate or a skipper or what have you. And there was a point where they were invited to travel on a boat that was going to bring back, you know, 100 tons of weed or some astronomical figure, and they declined the trip. But their friends went on the trip, and they all got busted. And Bo, at that point, devoted his life to helping his friends who were in prison. They were all in tough penitentiaries in America. And after they continued to visit these people in the penitentiary, they were able to see, because of their unique perspective and almost being in there with these individuals, that what separated them was just a wall, right? And you could make a lot of that wall and say, oh shit, I need food from my country, and oh, woe is me, and this is horrible. Or you could just say it's a fucking wall, man. That's it. I'm still breathing. I still have freedom of movement within my area, and I can do whatever I want in here.
Yeah.
That has been my guiding principle ever since. Don't serve time. Make the time serve you. That fueled my desire to speak, read, and write Thai. I would get up at 7 a.m. and open a book. I had all these people. Once you make this transition, you become a light in a very dark place, and people are just drawn to you, you know, and it's much the same here. Like, we have people come in here all the time, and they just love being in this place. It's a magical place. We've got hummingbirds and dragonflies and all deer running around. Like, there's lots of animals and everything's green, and, you know, it's just magical. People just love being here. They get rejuvenated. It's very quiet, very serene, very relaxing. And that's kind of the attitude I had, because I'm like, I'm not serving time. I modeled myself as a journalist. I'm like, I have to learn this language so I can speak to these people, because there's all these interesting stories in here. This is a fascinating experience. Excuse me, I start to spit when I talk. Getting super excited. It's a good thing you're in England.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, that's dictated my life ever since I made that transition. I'm not a practicing Christian now, but that whole transition from being a heavy drug dealer and looking around and seeing the mirror of who I was and who I no longer wanted to be, because drugs, I think they do serve some purpose in moderation. I'm a proponent of marijuana. I think smoking weed is good. I'm glad it's getting legalized in our country. Some of the harder drugs bring a lot of sorrow and misery. And I think the people that chase those drugs are in a lot of pain. And so if there's anything I can do to shed light on the fact that, you know, you can love yourself and you don't have to hate yourself by pouring these things or stabbing yourself and doing all that stuff, I'm all for it, man.
Yeah, definitely.
So just listening to your story, like, we had like a question written down where it says, when you look back at it all, do you see your story as a regretful episode or something that has shaped you? And I think I can kind of just guess that it's something.
You know the answer to that.
Yeah, it doesn't seem like it is at all. It seems like you got brought to where you are today, kind of thing, and you seem really happy.
I wouldn't change any of my life for anything.
Yeah.
People talk about going back to being 20 years old and, you know, starting over again. Like, no, man, I've got a daughter now who's 1, and you know, this family that now there's this song similar to the Cat in the Cradle. It's I think it's Kane Brown. He's a country music singer, and the chorus goes something like, I grew up without a dad, so I'm gonna be the best one I can.
Yeah.
You know, and he taught me a lot by not being there.
Yeah.
And the epilogue to my story is that my father was a horrible dad growing up. And the church he was in, the apocalyptic cult, the leader died maybe 10 years before my father did. And the new guy who took over, once he got into power, he took a look around and said, you know what? Every fucking single thing that we thought was true was wrong. We're not 100,000 special people. We're all in the same mix together. And it's not our job to elevate ourselves and distance ourselves from the rest of the world. It's our job to embrace humanity and be true neighbors and true friends to everyone around us, and to embody the real Christ story, you know, which is to serve people and to be with the rejected and the ones that are demeaned in society, and to love the people as much as possible. And my father, credit to him eternally, he embraced all of that, and he agreed with this guy, and he changed everything. The church split in half. I remember this is actually more like 20 years ago. I said 10, but he changed, and he became a wonderful father. And the day that he died, we spent 3 or 4 hours together. I mean, we hung out almost. He was my best friend. He was my best man in my wedding after this change. And we had a wonderful relationship. And I'm ultra grateful for that. The day he died, we walked 5 miles together and talked, and just, you know, we couldn't have been much closer.
Yeah.
And I'm grateful for that.
Amazing. Yeah, it is. Wow. I guess I'm interested to know, when you were obviously banged up, you said you found religion again, but then now that you don't follow religion again. So what was it about, returning back to kind of normal life? And I guess what was it like adjusting back to normal life once you were released? And kind of how did you end up moving away from religion?
That's a good question too, because it's not at all like I thought it was going to be. For the 5.5 years I was banged up, I thought when I get home from this shit, life's going to be perfect and it's going to be easy because I've already gone through all the hard stuff. So life's going to be ultra easy. Honestly, life is much harder outside prison than it is inside prison. Oh. Because in prison, you have other people making most of your decisions for you. Out here, there's a lot more challenge. There's a lot more distraction. There's a lot more danger. That's something I'm very adamant about. But the renaissance that I experienced in prison, where I read over 500 books and I studied my ass off and I expended my mind in new and dramatic ways. Obviously, this is a much more beautiful life, and it overwhelmed me the first year out. I thought, all my things that I held dear were wrong. But I did come out with this sense of purpose, and I started an advertising firm. I made a lot of money legally. I used the same hunger. I came out, when you were kids, you guys have cars, you could pull them backwards, and when you let them go, they shot across the room. That's how it was when I came out. I was like, man, I got to make up for lost time. I spent most of my 30s in prison. Now I'm 30. I think I was 38 when I got home. I went in when I was 31, and I was like, man, I'm that car, man. And I just shot off. Within 2 years, I was married. I had a big house. I had a couple rentals. I was driving a Lexus. Everything was good on the outside, but inside I was like, it wasn't right. And so another couple of years, I relapsed. I used drugs for a long time. I lost everything. I got divorced. And then from there, I built a foundation that was real and true. And I'll probably die here, man. Hopefully not for a long fucking time, but yeah, we're on the right path now, and it feels great.
That's amazing. So how come you ended up moving away from religion again after you refound it?
Religion for me, there's two types. The one that I'm involved with right now is this hummingbird that's drinking from the fountain I put in, and it's in the trees blowing right now, and it's in the deer that come early in the morning. And there's another type which is made by man, and it's a brick building, and you go there on Sundays and you pretend that you're a good person, that you don't curse and you don't drink too much and all this stuff. Yeah. And that one I've tried to get involved with. I remember the first one I got involved with was out in Lexington, and we had a men's group. We meet for like an hour and a half every Sunday before church. And one morning I went there, and one of the guys started using the N-word. He's like, in this, in that. I was looking around. I'm like, it's a bunch of old white dudes. This is really just a club. And these guys are all prejudiced rednecks. They probably have rebel flags flying. Yeah. And Saxagatha, that was the last time I went to Saxagatha. I'm going to call them out because that was some nasty shit. And every time I've gotten close to organized religion, I've not looking for reasons, but I found reasons that it doesn't compare to this. And so 7 days a week, I'm devoted to this place, building it up. What we have here is, it was all dilapidated and run down. There was houses on the property. One was gutted, no inside, no outside, covered in moss. I restored it over the last 18 months. I didn't know how to do drywall. I didn't know how to roof building. I didn't know how to drive a nail hardly. But now I'm like an accomplished construction guy, and I know that the value in sweating and just working hard, getting up early and working until the sun goes down. Like, that's my church, man.
Yeah, good on you.
Unreal. Yeah. What an amazing story. It's, it is inspirational. Obviously to see where you are now and looking back at everything you've been through, it's absolutely amazing. But yeah, I'm kind of out of questions, Seb. Was there anything else you wanted to say, or anything else that I guess you wanted to say to the viewers?
I think I've said it, man. I mean, for you guys, thanks so much for reaching out. I love the fact that you two do podcasts together. And I don't know you well, but the invitation to come out here is real, man. I'm in South Carolina. You guys are welcome anytime. Fly out here. I'll pick you up in the airport. And you guys can come out and experience my church.
Yeah, definitely will.
Yeah, and we really appreciate you coming on and telling your story. It's unbelievable, you know, it really is.
Yeah. Thank you very much. We do really appreciate it.
Yeah, and we'll stay in touch for sure.
Yes, please. Yeah, man. I hope this can get out there and somebody listening can get inspired. If you guys want to reach out to me, at Jesse Moskel, JESSEMOSKEL on Twitter. I'm on Facebook a bit, but that's it. Yeah, we don't do advertising anymore, so you can't get me there.
Yeah. Well, thanks for coming on. Congratulations on the life that you've built for yourself. It looks absolutely amazing. And yeah, congratulations. Well done. Killed it.
Yeah, second that.
Kamsahamnida.
Thanks very much.
Thank you very much, mate. Thank you.
Sleep well.
You as well, mate. Bye-bye.
All right, cheers.